The man who told me about this terrifying experience in the Colorado wilderness is one of those distant relatives that everyone has. They're your third cousin, twice removed or something to that effect. I'm not positive how exactly we're related, but he's an incredible guy. I'll call him Greg. Greg is a decorated Green Beret with a silver star to his name that he earned by capturing the leader of an Afghan sniper cell without incurring any casualties. Despite his status as a huge badass and his not unconsiderable size of 6'3" and 200 pounds, Greg, he's a teddy bear. Just an extremely humble, kind person. I have a lot of experience in the outdoors, having lived in Colorado for most of my life, and Greg and I had an extended conversation about our adventures in the woods at my grandmother's house for Thanksgiving. We were sitting on the couch, wearing tacky holiday sweaters when the conversation turned to hunting. Greg mentioned offhand that he used to be an avid hunter, but had an experience that turned him off of it. He said he doesn't even like guns anymore, something I found surprising coming from an accomplished soldier. I pushed him to tell me what happened, and though he seemed uncomfortable with the idea, he finally did. I'm going to switch to first person now and try to share exactly what Greg told me. It was late October, which means elk season up in the Indian Peaks wilderness, and I went up there to bag a few elk and just relax for a few days by myself. I parked the truck up near a trailhead, about 8 miles from where I wound up setting camp, and was looking forward to a nice weekend in the woods with some peace and quiet after packing all my gear in and getting ready. The first morning, I was in my deer blind about 20 feet up a tree with a cup of coffee and my rifle, and the sun had just come up an hour or so ago. About 50 yards from my tree, the tree line ended and opened into this big meadow where a lot of elk tended to roll through, and I could sit my rifle pretty well through the trees and see most of the big grassy area. Maybe a couple of hours passed, which really isn't boring that deep in the woods. I just drank my coffee from my thermo and listened to all the life around me, feeling the woods getting ready for winter. I couldn't believe my luck when I glanced over at the meadow and saw a large group of elk had started grazing in the meadow. The silent animals plodded along, munching at the grass, oblivious to me watching. Among the group was one of the most beautiful elk I had ever seen. It was what's called a monarch, which means its antlers had 8 points each, something really rare. I quietly clicked the safety off of my rifle and sighted it in. When you're hunting an animal like this, you want to put the bullet right where the skull meets the spine in order to sever the spinal column and kill it instantly and painlessly. The focus when you get in the zone is incredible. I swear I could feel the firing pin punch forward and the bullet leave the barrel as I pulled the trigger. That beautiful elk went down silently, and all the others scattered for the tree line. I was ecstatic about the shot and the elk as I climbed down out of the blind and set off for the meadow. I had left my rifle in my blind, something I regretted soon, and had only one small knife on me to gut the animal and drag it back to the camp. As I was making the short walk between my blind and the meadow, I noticed that the woods around me were completely silent. Some of this is normal after you fire a gun in the woods, but for it to drag on this long was unsettling. I thought nothing of it and continued the short walk through the dense pines. As I was about to clear the trees and step into the meadow, I noticed something odd. I could see the elk's body lying in the grass through the trees, but there was something else there. There was what looked like another elk, antlers and all, on the opposite side of the dead elk from where I was coming to walk out of the tree line, almost looking as though it were gently nuzzling the other elk's dead body. This was weird, to see an elk treat a dead elk like this. They usually just scatter, but I continued walking toward it, traipsing in the duff and hollering in an attempt to startle this other elk off. It snapped its head up and looked at me. Over the body of its fallen friend, this strange new elk eyed me with an unafraid glare. I say glare because it didn't feel like an animal looking at me anymore. Its glassy black eyes gave me the same caught red-handed feeling that you would get when your parents would catch you doing something wrong. I felt suddenly uncomfortable and out of place in the woods that I loved so much, and somehow hated and guilty. I no longer wanted the elk. I stopped dead in my tracks and watched this animal as it eyed me angrily. And what it did next gives me nightmares to this day. It stood up, and it was not an elk. The thing that stood before me on the other side of the dead elk must have been lying on its stomach, and it put its arms down and pushed up, putting its legs under it. It reared back, glaring at me all along with its evil glass eyes. My breath caught in my throat. Most of its body was at least somewhat human, but terribly emaciated and elongated. It appeared to be 10 feet tall, not including the antlers atop of the elk head. It was bald everywhere but the neck up, and looked sickly pale pink. Its legs, the knee bent backwards, like the back legs of an elk. This horrible, skinny, naked, unnatural thing just stood there, glaring at me with a hatred that was palpable. The woods around us were silent. It might have been seconds, minutes, or hours. I felt the disapproving parent feeling shift. I felt more like an ant under a shoe. I took a step back. My boots felt 10 pounds, my body felt numb, and the noise of my footstep was ear-splitting. I took one more, and then turned and ran. Running through the thick woods is tough, but I ran faster than I have in my life. I passed under my blind with my $4,000 rifle sitting in it without even slowing down. I ran all the way back to my camp, which must have been a mile, before I stopped for a breath. It took me another minute to dare to look behind me. I was alone, but the woods around me were still silent and brooding. I wanted more than anything to pack up and go home, but I knew that I would not likely make it back to the car before nightfall, and I did not want to be exposed at night. I cooked an MRE in my tent and stayed in there the rest of the day. When night fell, I wrapped myself in my sleeping bag and tried to sleep, but I couldn't stop myself from startling at every little noise. I kept thinking about possible rational explanations for what I saw. Maybe there's a crazy guy out here who found an elk head and is wearing it around and scaring people, but no explanation I came up with quelled the maddening fear that I felt. That horrible sense of being hated and guilty and far from home. And nothing explained why that thing was 10 feet tall with inverted knees. As soon as the sun came up, I ran back to the blind and took it down, then ran back to the camp with my rifle and pack, packed everything up and hiked out. I've never fired a gun in the woods since, and I don't intend to ever again. I'm not a spiritual person, but if that wasn't something in the forest telling me to leave it alone, I don't know what is. I certainly can take a hint. I don't think I'll ever know exactly what the creature was, but I know what I saw. Next time you're up in the woods alone, be quiet, be respectful, and don't kill anything you don't have to. I thought at first that Greg's story was too far-fetched to be true, but as he told it, I saw how truly scared he was. This confident, soft-spoken military man was stuttering through his story, hands shaking and face pale. I still don't know what to make of it, but the area he said that this occurred is one I'm quite familiar with, and it can be an eerie place. I've had a few experiences solo camping up there myself, but nothing on this scale. Sometimes, being alone in the woods can feel like anything but. It just might be that there's some force out there, some inhuman creature that guards the woods, and just in case, I take extra care to be respectful whenever I'm among nature. You never know what could be watching.